I'm Gary Livingood, and today is Saturday, June the 8th, 2019. I'm at the Community Media Center in Westminster, Maryland, to talk with Russell Bly as part of the Veterans Oral History Collection. Mr. Bly, you were in the military, correct?
That is correct.
How about recounting some of your experiences about how did you get into the military and some of the things that you experienced while you were there?
I graduated from high school in Mount Airy there in 1967, and I thought I wanted to be a computer tech. So I went to computer school for a year, and that gave me a deferment as far as the military draft. I went to work, I graduated from school, went to work for NASA, and then got laid off from NASA, and I went to work for the old B&O Railroad. And then I had taken reserve time, and there was 12 of us, all went in together there at Woodbine, and we were all supposed to go to boot camp together in the Great Lakes. And then when we got out of boot camp, we were supposed to go for more schooling and this guarantee, that type of stuff. So that all happened, except for while I was in boot camp at the Great Lakes, about halfway through, they send the high-pressure salesmen down to talk to the young boys. And I had a contract for 4 years and more schooling and whatnot.
And this was with the Navy?
This is with the Navy, right.
And what year was this?
1969. Okay. 1969, January, February the 23rd, I went active. And then, anyway, I guess it was probably in April up there, they sent a fellow down, and he told me that I didn't have enough schooling, I hadn't made enough grades, this, that, and the other, for them to send me to the school that they needed, that I had to sign up for another 2 years. Well, I gave the Navy 4 years already, was what I was going to give them. And I said, I'm not giving you another 2 years. But at that time, I didn't know I had a contract on it, and he talked me into signing out of the contract. So now I got boot camp and nothing. So I come out of boot camp and I'm just a seaman recruit. I don't have any guarantees to go. Everybody else, the 11 other fellas, went to Bainbridge, Maryland. And I got to U.S. Bainbridge in the Tonkin Gulf, right off of Vietnam, whatnot. And actually it turned out to me was a better duty than what they had, because I wound up being on the showboat of the United States. It was a nuclear-powered guided missile frigate. And
what was the name of that frigate?
USS Bainbridge, DLGN-25. Matter of fact, I got a picture of the nuclear-powered task force. That was the Bainbridge, the Enterprise, and the Long Beach. And we all worked together to protect the pilots that were flying in and out on bombing missions or whatever other type of missions that they had in Vietnam. We would be, the aircraft carrier would be probably 50 miles out offshore, so that she would be out of gun range. Then the cruiser, heavy cruiser, would be 5 miles in further, closer to shore than her. And then we would be running 12 miles in, so that if a pilot got shot down or whatnot, and he was coming back, we carried 2 helicopters on the fantail. So we could send the helicopters in to pick him up or whatnot. And even if that didn't work, we had high-speed boats that we could send in. And let me show you a picture of one of them. Let me see, where is it? When I say high speed, I didn't bring that one. Oh, that, when I'm saying high speed, it was definitely high speed. They were like, and we had places that we stored them on the ship that you would run in, so they would run it.
Now, when you say high speed, what kind of?
I'm talking about 70 miles an hour or faster. So they were, I guess, what you would call PT boats.
Oh, like swift boats.
Right, yes. Except for these had skis under them. When they got up to high speed, they'd be completely out of the water so that they couldn't take a hit from a torpedo or a gunshot. It had to hit the boat.
I see.
And then when they would get into where the plane wreck was or whatnot, then they would slow down, put small boats in if they needed. It was quite an experience. Like I said, we were the showboat for the United States.
And by showboat, what do you mean?
Well, it was clean. Everything on it clean. The Navy is very dirty. And the fact of it is that when you consider the smokestacks that they have, they burn diesel fuel, whatnot. This had nothing. When you were out to sea, everything stayed clean, everything stayed polished. The only thing you got was salt water, that type of deal. But it was like when you came into port, we at least hated to be tied up next to the standard fleet, because they every day would blow their stacks. They'd have to clean their stacks out, and all that shit would wind up on our decks, and we'd have to wash it because the captain he wanted the boat to be spit fine. Mm-hmm. And it was like not being a designated radarman, gunman, torpedo man, just being standard seaman. They put me in the deck force, what they called the deck force, which was the guys who handled all the watches while you were at sea. Lookouts, steering the ship, when you went tied up, and that type of, or all the painting. It's like if you were painting this or that, whatever. It's like, and the boat was so dang fast that we broke I don't know how many speed records getting to different places, and we'd get there 2 days ahead of time. So the old man would say, "All right, throw the anchor board." He said, "Now, anybody that volunteers to paint the ship so it looks like it's brand new when we go in won't have to serve any watches. You would have liberty while you're on." So I would volunteer for that. They'd throw you over the side of the ship in a bench and whatnot, and you'd be there scraping this. But of course you didn't have to scrape much because the high speed blasted all the paint off the ship. So you would either be with a roller or a spray gun. And it was a different kind of class, and the fact of it is, because of that, and me not being designated anything, I wound up being in the marching parade unit of the ship. In other words, there was 36 of us. We would go back on the flat fantail of the ship and practice marching in spot, throwing the guns in the air, and all the fancy stuff that you did for a parade. Well, the first place that we ever went, as far as that I understood what we were going to Australia, and we were going there for their centennial, and the Queen of England was there, and we were going to march in front of her, and we got third place in the thing, which I thought was fantastic. You know what I mean? Well, it turned out to be the following day, the Queen invited us to her boat, the marching unit, and we had tea and crumpets with the Queen of England. She came in and sat down, and like I said, that was just par for the course, as far as like they wanted the United States to be here or to do there. And that was the thing about it, is like I said, we was kind of the showboat, because they could send us so quickly. It was like the time that the astronauts weren't sure where the astronauts were going to come down at. They'd had some trouble, whatnot. And we were in Hawaii. Well, I had just got off the ship, and I hadn't got to the other end of the pier when they said, "Hey, everybody back quick." they need us to go out and rescue these pilots, whatnot, you know. And they did. We went out there, but somebody else got there before we did. But we were only a half a day away. You know what I'm saying? It was like, it just was utterly amazing to me that.
What was your age at this point in time?
20 years old. I was about 20 years old because, let's see, I got married in September of 1969, and I was 21 then. My parents wouldn't let me get married until I was 21, right? And it was like, after my first cruise, we came back to Vallejo, California. And that was above San Francisco. And that's where they took all the nukes. And they took us up there and they put new nuclear power in the ship, forward and aft, and whatnot like that. And then when they got finished with that, it was October of that year, we moved to Long Beach, California. Now that was our home port in the United States. Now overseas, our home port was Subic Bay. And Subic Bay, we worked with everybody. I worked with the battleship New Jersey. They brought her out of mothballs and needed her guns over there. I worked with the carrier Enterprise, the heavy cruiser, I'm trying to think of what the name of that was, St. Paul, the St. Paul, the one that had the 19 guys killed, the one gun turret blew up, whatnot. I got to see a lot, but actually I didn't get hurt in the fact that I wasn't exposed. We were more of a show, whatnot. It was quite eye-lifting in the sense of it was nuclear power, how fast that it could go. The deck force, I learned how to be a lookout, and the guns, we had 3-inch guns on board. I learned how to do that, and you had to learn all this stuff 90 days after you signed on board, or you got jerked off. And the other thing was, like, you think about just recently, they talked about the president's son getting a top secret clearance. Everybody that was on that boat had to have a top secret clearance. It was like, I guess that was one of the, when I didn't get to school, whatnot, in boot camp, whatnot, that they sent me because my parents called me and my aunts and uncles called me and said, the FBI was here asking a bunch about you. And I thought, well, I don't know what the hell all that's about, you know what I'm saying? But when I got out of boot camp, I found out what it was all about. And it was a great experience, and the fact of it is, just think about it, that you had to qualify. I had to be qualified to go down in the engine room, to stay on watch for all that type of stuff. I had to qualify to steer the ship. I had to qualify to man the guns. I had to qualify to fire the torpedoes, to fire the rockets. I had to be we didn't have any Marines, so we had to be our own police force. So they had a armed guy at the forward missile house, the aft missile house, and the entrance to both reactors. As far as we had 2 reactors, which would be like your 2 engines, you know what I mean? And then you had to also be qualified as a cook and a potato peeler and a medic.
So you had to be a multitasker.
Right. And the thing about it was I was just so eager at that age. I was willing to do anything, and it was exciting. It really was exciting. And then they wanted me to be a gunner's mate. Then they wanted me to be a boatswain's mate. You know, and my biggest problem was I could not pass the military tests. Before you could make rank over there, you had to take the military test of that rank. And the one chief told me, he said, Russell, you get too tight. You're too tight, he said. So he slipped me a little something to drink. And I went down, I passed the test, and then I got to be I was a designated torpedoman. I said, can you imagine that? Now here I've done all this training, but I don't know anything about torpedoes or this type of stuff, but now I'm the designated torpedoman. And which was good for the fact of it is they sent me, when we were in port, they sent me to San Diego down there for school for 16 weeks to learn about torpedoes and a 23 sonar that we had, which was, I'll never forget that. I became part of what they called F2. That was a division which was sonarmen and torpedomen. Well, I had already been qualified on radar, tracking planes, and all that stuff, but I didn't know anything about tracking or looking for subs and that type of stuff. And we had a 23 sonar system on board, and that was completely different than anything I had ever seen or knew about. They'd put you in a little dark room about as big as this, and there was a scope about that big. And one little dot would start in the center, and it would go out. And if it hit anything, the noise, if it hit anything, it would show up on the screen. Now, you can imagine being in a dark room, looking at that light. Well, about 5 minutes of that's all I could take in the beginning before I'd fall asleep. I'd be pulling my hair out and this, that, and the chief would smack me up alongside the head and say, boy, you can't do that. You're supposed to be. And, but after 4 years, I could sit there for 36 hours. If you found a sub or whatnot, you didn't leave the chair. You were the one that stayed with the sub until we either found out who it was or whatever. Because like I was there one time when we come out of Hawaii, and I was on board, on the watch. 28 hours it took me to lose that sub that I found. I sat in that chair for 28 hours. It's like, wow. But it was completely, it was like, and then they had the underwater phone, they called it Gertrude. You talked to, it was like, just like a phone. You could talk to a submarine with that, or you could talk to the fish. It's like, it was unbelievable. Like you could hear the whales making a different noise. And we had one guy in our group, and he was fantastic as far as making whale noises. He could talk to them babies, and they'd talk back to us. It was kind of comical in the sense, and it was a lot of things about it that was exciting. In the fact of it was, we were the flagship for the Northern Fleet, and we carried a lot of times when we were over there, we carried the Admiral on board, and at that time it was Admiral Zumwalt, whatnot. And I can remember coming out of our little dark hole, and then we go into the radar room where they have all these other big blips and whatnot. And then, of course, it was the captain's office and area, and then that's usually where the admiral would be if he was on board. They would call it different flag status. And I remember we were over there one time, and we were coming out of Singapore and got caught in one of these, you call it a hurricane or whatnot. And I was at the helm steering the ship. And I remember now, this ship was 538 feet long, and it was only 50 feet wide. And I can holding on to this thing and watching the whole front of the ship just disappear into a wave, and I just thought, of course, stupid young man, I thought it was so neat. I can remember seeing these guys, oh my God, there's this guy over here and they brought the lookout shed because they were afraid they'd get washed overboard, but I just thought it was great. I was having such a good time steering the boat. Bly, you're nuts, that type of stuff. And it was like, I remember we were 50 foot, the O2 level on the main deck was 50 foot above the water. And my torpedoes, I had 3 tubes on either side, were there. And I had to go up there every morning and wash them and paint them and shine them and all this kind of stuff because the old man wanted everything shine. I'd go out there and there'd be all these damn fish around us. And I thought, how in the hell did these fish get up here? You know what I mean? Well, I'm out there one day and here comes a tornado down the side of the ship and it's sucking these fish out of the water, blowing them up all over the deck. You know, and I thought, now I know how the fish are getting there. I said, I hadn't seen that before. You know, I mean, a lot of times my watch was at night. So if it was during the daytime, I was sleeping. That was the other thing. That was, you know, you don't think about the modernization. But when I first went over on board, there was no air conditioning. And we were over there in some pretty hot times. And part of the watch was you had to go around and wake up everybody that signed a book. And you'd have to go find these guys. I'm laying up at the forecastle, or I'm laying over in the anchor room, or I'm over underneath the 3-inch guns, or I'm back at the ASROC, or this type deal, and I'm sleeping there. So then they give you that if you caught that part of the watch, the wake up for the next watch, you had to take the crew, the book with you and go around, wake everybody up, find out where they were, get them to sign the book. Then that way, when you came back, everybody was awake for the next watch and they had signed it. If they didn't show up, they signed the book that was their ass, not yours. Mm-hmm. And that was an experience in the fact that when you had to go down in the chief's quarters or the Lieutenant JG's quarters, the officers' quarters, and wake them up and get them to sign the book. And it was like, you wouldn't have thought about it, but sometimes I had to take an armed guard with me because they would refuse to sign the book. I said, well, I'm not going back without your signature. So you might as well wake up and sign this book. Because I said, because my ass is going to be hanging out if you don't show up for watch. And like I said, you learned things on that. But like when we came back, after we came back from San Francisco, we came to Long Beach. She had air conditioning on board. Oh my Lord, was what a experience that was. And then I found out why everybody, in other words, you'd have 5 bunks in a room. And every bunk had, underneath it, was that was your personal area. In other words, but the guys on the bottom were all the senior guys that had the most time and most of the rank. And I couldn't figure it out at first. Then I accidentally got one of the bottom bunks, and it was right there next to the air conditioning, whatnot. And I thought, oh, now I know why all the senior guys are down on the bottom. You know, it's like it was.
Now, all 4 years on the Bainbridge?
All 4 years on the Bainbridge. Yep.
But during that period of time, you as an individual apparently got to experience a lot of outstanding things.
Oh my, yes.
That in and of itself was quite an education.
Oh, well, you talk about that, like the junior officers. Every 6 months it seemed like we got a whole bunch of graduates from the Naval Academy. And they come out and they could read the book to you word for word, but they would not take your word as far as experience. It's like I remember the one, they wanted us to fire torpedoes at a sub, but now training torpedoes. And then they wanted us to retrieve the torpedoes. They would float to the top, and you were supposed to put a diver in the water, and he would go over and put the gear on it, and then you would bring it on board. I kept telling this. I was a 3rd-class petty officer at this time. I had already put two and a half years on board ship. I said, look, we got to put the man in the water before the torpedo gets here. I said, if you lower him down with the pulley, the thing that you're going, the torpedo will be gone before he gets into the water. I said, they're not going to stop. Or I said, this thing don't stop on a dime. even though that they say all stop, you got tons of weight still drifting through the water. You know what I mean? I said, and it's faster than a man can swim. So I told this guy this, and he wasn't paying attention to me. So he waits for the torpedo to get right there by us and puts the guy in. Well, the torpedo is now back at the screws. So whoever was in charge of the decides to back it down to make the ship go backwards to stop. Well, when he did, they sucked the diver's rope into the props. Ooh. And he's trying to swim, and he's being pulled by the props. And I'm yelling, take the rope and take your knife and cut the damn rope, cut the rope. You know what I mean? And he's fighting for everything he can to stay to the surface. And finally he heard me and cut the rope. And so then the junior officer said, well, let's have a man overboard drill. I'm thinking, have a man overboard drill? I said, you don't give a shit about this $6,000 torpedo that we just cut in half and all this stuff. So so that's what we did. And we came around a couple different times and the guy that was in the water was not too happy. He gave us several signs that we knew that he wasn't happy. You know what I mean? And it was like I got ordered up for a captain's mast because of and I will say that the Lieutenant J.G. admitted. He said, Mr. Bly told me to put the man in water because of the drifting. I was reading the book. I didn't take in consideration the drifting. You know what I mean? I said, yeah. I said, well, anyway, I didn't get anything out of it, and he didn't get anything out of it either, but got a good tongue lashing, and we didn't lose the man. We did lose the torpedo. It was a lot of fantastic stuff as far as training. It's like, once I trained, it was like, we were one time, I'm going to say we were off of San Diego, out about 60, 70 miles. And they had a training exercise with a torpedo and a submarine and the helicopters and all this type of stuff. We were supposed to shoot the torpedoes. They were supposed to go down and chase after the sub. But they had these helicopters that were hovering too close to the water. They had a listening device so that they could listen to what was going on. And I kept telling us, man, you can't get subs. I mean, that helicopter's got to get the hell away. I said, that sub will hear him. I mean, that torpedo will hear him, and he ain't interested in the sub. He'll be going after him. Well, twice the torpedo come out of the water for the helicopter. You know what I mean? And then we did finally get one to get in the bridge of the sub. Of course, the sub said they was never hit. They was never hit. Well, when it came to the surface, we took pictures. There the cotton-picking torpedo was sitting in the, of course, it was dummies. That was another great experience, and the fact of it was. And you don't think about rocket-thrown torpedoes. We had what they call ASROC. In other words, if somebody picked up a submarine or whatnot, well, of course, most of the submarines were faster. If they were there or whatnot, they wouldn't be there by the time you launched the torpedo and she went to get you. But if you took a rocket-thrown torpedo, he could come right down on top of where the sub was, and there was no way he could get away from the torpedo at that. Mm-hmm. And that was another great experience to learn all that data.
Well, it sounds like you had a tremendous amount of experiences in the Navy, but how has that impacted you in the rest of your life?
Well, one of the first things in the Navy, I was in Da Nang. I was just as green as grass. And I had to watch the garbage watch. Here I am with a 45 and a M16, and I'm told stand on the fantail and watch the garbage barge. Don't let anybody get on the garbage barge and come to the ship. They can get on the garbage barge and do what they want on the garbage barge as long as they don't come. So I'm standing back there and I'm watching these people come out in small boats and whatnot and get on the garbage barge and shoot each other over our garbage that I can't do a thing about.
These are Vietnamese you're talking about.
Yes, yeah. And it was like, you just, to me, I'm getting 3 square meals a day and whatnot. I just could not believe that these people wanted our trash that bad that they would be willing to kill each other over it. And it was like, this is the other thing. We're coming out of Da Nang, and it was so foggy that night. We come out, and I said, they put me up on the bow. And I said, why am I up on the bow? He said, there's so many wooden junks out here, we can't see them, we can't pick them up on the radar, but if we run over them, we need somebody to say, hey, there's here or there. Well, we were very lucky in the fact that we come out of there, we didn't run over anybody. But that was the other thing. It was like, I've been to Singapore, I've been to Bangkok, I've been to Hong Kong, I've been to Russia, I've been to South Africa, Hawaii, Australia. It's like there's not many places in the world that I wasn't. I was at the Great Wall of China. I was at the Emperor's Palace in Japan, all representing the United States for different things that were going on militarily. Yeah, and it's like I said, it's like I couldn't get over all the koi that they had, all the koi ponds, the fish ponds that they had around the palace in Japan was just unbelievable. And you had to stay on the trail and not get off. If you got off the trail, they were right there to get you back on it, things like that. But it was, I found out later that you were part of an elite team to be representing the United States, which was a great honor to myself. And the fact of it is because I didn't realize that I had fell into that group. But like I said, oh my God, can you imagine standing on, it's like this, vibrating so bad that everything in the room is shaking. But you had to go back there and practice your marching for that, and flipping guns on this stuff that was the fantail of the ship. It shake that bad. Well,
were you married at the time?
I got married after my first cruise. In other words, the ship, what they called it, Westpacks on the ship. And you'd be gone for 6 to 9 months.
Yep.
And I got married before I went out on my second Westpac. Yeah. And that was definitely different because for the first 2 years, I didn't have any rank so I didn't qualify for Navy housing. And we were living there in Long Beach, California, and we lived out in Brentwood. And that was 17 miles from the base. Now, of course, it's only $95 a month, the rent, the apartment. We didn't have a car, whatnot, and I would hitchhike in for the base every morning to be there at the ship. And if you made cruises and whatnot, every time you came back in, they gave you all these Walt Disney passes for Disney World, that type of stuff. Yeah, it was quite an experience. And the fact of it is, when I got married, I was only making $127 a month. Now, can you imagine living in California on $127 a month? And my wife got $100 a month. So we had $100, we got $95 to pay the rent. Couldn't afford television, that type of stuff. And it was like the first year I was there for Christmas. And it's like every Christmas tree, they sprayed it green, red, all this kind of stuff. And get a Christmas tree that wasn't sprayed was the most ugly thing you ever seen, and I think I paid $40 for it. It was like, and I had to carry it. They wouldn't allow you on the bus with a Christmas tree, and I didn't have a car, so I carried that thing 6 blocks or whatever to our apartment. And another thing is, where we lived there in Long Beach, there was a stripper bar 2 blocks down the street from us. Well, it seems like all the guys knew where Russell Bly lived. Instead of going back to the ship, we'd wake up in the morning and there'd be 7 or 8 guys on my floor, asleep, but not, going in the ship. But it was a great experience. My wife was a great cook, and after a while, a lot of the guys would go over to the grocery store and bring her food so that they could have a nice meal while we were there. And then I guess it was 3rd Westpac. I became 3rd class and I qualified for Navy housing. And that's another thing. We were, Navy housing was in San Pedro, California, right on top of the hill, $1 Million Hill they call it now. And you'd be out of the smog and you could see the island, all this on the coastline. But you'd look down to where you had to go and down into Long Beach, the sky would be purple, green, red. And I was there for 2 earthquakes. That was another thing that was exciting. Yeah, but like I said, it was a very different thing that I was used to. But the exposure to the rest of the world was unbelievable. It's like going in and out of Australia, the white cliffs that they had, the 21-gun salute that we got from the forts that was up there on the hill to us. And then when we were anchored in there, they had all these party barges that would come around. If you had to stand guard the ship, and they would come up close enough to, hey, you want a beer? We'll throw you a beer, that kind of stuff. And you couldn't do any of that. But hey, they didn't care. They'd have the band dance. Look at these pretty good dancing girls. Don't you want to come over here? That kind of stuff. It was a fantastic place. I was at, like I say, Sydney, Melbourne. I took the train across the continent. I took the bullet train across in Japan. It was 120 miles an hour. That was unbelievable. Then I took the local out there where people were sitting on the roof and everything else. Is how they ever run a railroad like I worked for the railroad before I went to I said, I don't, how they cannot kill everybody that, that's hanging onto the sides. But they really didn't go that fast. But that bullet train definitely did.
Well, Mr. Bly, it's a shame that we have to wrap this up because it sounds like we probably go on for quite a while.
Oh, hey, 4 years in there is a long while.
It's a long while, but I do want to thank you for your service, and it sounds like that the Uncle Sam has afforded you a lot of unique experiences.
Oh my, yes.
Thank you again, sir.
Thank you.